We need to have a complete review of business rates altogether. It is a perverse system that often really does impact small businesses hard, and I think we need to look again in terms of having a land value tax system or a system based on revenue turnover rather than on the rental values.
The problem is all this is going to cost money, and we've already got a social care crisis, a crisis in the NHS. Where's it all going to come from?
Well, I think it's going to be a rebalancing away from some of the bigger companies. Of course, don't forget this is a government that has been consistently reducing corporation tax, and that often helps some of the biggest companies most of all. So let's look at the bigger companies paying a bit more so that the smaller businesses, the businesses that a city like Brighton absolutely depends on, are able to prosper and thrive, because they are the ones who are really the wealth generators, the generators of jobs.
I'm keen to talk to you about Brexit now. When the House of Lords defeated the government this week, they backed an amendment to the Brexit bill that would guarantee the rights of EU citizens living in the UK. What do you think it says about the level of scrutiny provided by the House of Commons that this is happening in the Lords instead?
Well, I think it's a damning indictment on what happened in the House of Commons, and I think what we've seen is a complete absence of robust opposition on this issue. The tragedy was that Labour, essentially, although they put forward a set of very good amendments, also said prior to doing that come what may, they would support the triggering of Article 50. So as soon as they'd raised the white flag on that, as soon as they had given their unconditional support for triggering Article 50 come what may, any leverage they might have had to get those amendments passed was completely gone. And as a result, we've had the House of Lords being the ones who are standing up for the right of EU citizens to remain, the House of Lords who are likely to be standing up for proper scrutiny in the Commons. That is farcical. What we should have is a real opposition coming from Labour, working with the other opposition parties, myself, the Lib Dems, the Nationalists, so that we can have a common position. Because if we had that, we could have stopped this extreme Brexit for which Theresa May has absolutely no mandate.
So you blame Labour then for effectively rolling over and allowing the government to get their way on Brexit?
Completely blame Labour for rolling over and backing the government. I accept, of course, the outcome of the referendum says that we are leaving the EU, but there is a wealth of difference between a soft Brexit where you could remain part of the single market, where free movement could continue, where you've got social and environmental protections, and the extraordinarily extreme Brexit, the cliff edge Brexit that the Prime Minister is currently pursuing without any opposition coming from the official opposition.
The thing is, though, some people will look at what you've just said and think, well, you're just a bit of a sore loser. You're not accepting the result of the referendum where people voted to leave the EU.
People certainly voted to leave the EU, and that's not in question, but the issue of whether it was an extreme Brexit or a softer Brexit wasn't on the ballot paper. And if you're taking the Prime Minister seriously when she says she wants to bring the country together, well, there are 4 nations in the United Kingdom, 2 voted to remain, 2 voted to leave. So one might argue that if you want to try to keep the country together, the best way to do that would be to pursue a softer Brexit that would mean that you could actually bring people together in a much more effective way.
Let's talk now about the future of your own party, because the Greens are bumping along at about 4% in the polls. There was supposed to be this great left-wing uprising with people like Bernie Sanders in the US picking up votes, but you haven't benefited from that. Why not?
Well, don't forget that 1.3 million, I think, people voted for the Green Party in 2015 in a voting system which is absolutely inimical for smaller parties. So in spite of the fact that most of those people knew that under first past the post they weren't going to elect a Green Party person, 1.3 million people still voted Green in 2015.
But you don't seem to have built on that base, though, do you?
I think we are. Let's not forget, just to come back to the voting system for just one second, because I think it is so instrumental to what we're talking about. If we'd had a system of proportional representation, 1.3 million people voting Green could have led to somewhere between 20 or 24 MPs. That would have been a very big difference. And I think now what we're seeing is more people actually looking twice at Jeremy's leadership, because for whatever reason, unfortunately, he's not been able to deliver the kind of radical change that he'd talked about. And they want a party that is consistent about what it stands for and that will be very clear in its opposition to government policy on everything from the business rates hikes through to Brexit, through to, for example, infrastructure. At the minute, Labour supports Heathrow expansion, it supports Hinkley, the nuclear power station, it supports HS2. It's the Greens that are providing real opposition, suggesting a different way forward based on green energy, based on local transport links and so forth.
Do you think that the problem is that if you're left-wing, you'll vote for Jeremy Corbyn, and if you want to stop Brexit, you'll vote for the Lib Dems? So what's the point of the Green Party?
The point of the Greens is, first of all, I would challenge both of those assumptions that you've just made, but the point of the Greens is that you've got consistent leadership on policies where you know where the party stands on everything from nuclear weapons to nuclear power, through to real investment in green energy, through to the kinds of jobs that you could get if you insulated every single home in the country, bringing people's fuel bills down, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, addressing climate change. You'd have true sustainability at its heart there as well.
So are you looking to make alliances then with other left-wing parties? Not standing in elections, for example.
This is a question that I think is rightly being answered at local level. So there may well be some local areas where there's sufficient agreement and trust between the different parties to have a situation whereby perhaps one party will soft pedal or another party may perhaps stand down. But it's absolutely down to the local level to decide that. And for us, for the Greens, the big prize for that is about changing the voting system. You know, we've just recently had the referendum where the rallying cry was taking back control. I think we should start by taking back control of our democracy.
And are those conversations going on already with parties like the Lib Dems or even with Labour?
Certainly at a local level, lots of those conversations are going on, and the think tank Compass is acting as a kind of a moderator, if you like, a chair of many of those meetings. And up and down the country, these issues are being debated because more and more people recognise that with first past the post, their voice doesn't count. They're looking at Labour and recognising that, frankly, whoever the Labour Party leader is, the chances of them winning an outright majority at the next election is vanishingly small. So instead of fighting amongst ourselves, is there scope for us to be working together on certain issues? And if there is, I think it would be irresponsible not to actually address that.
You've talked a lot about the voting system, which clearly doesn't help smaller parties like your own. The thing that I often wonder is, do you find it quite lonely being the only Green MP in the House of Commons?
I'd certainly like there to be more alongside me, that's for sure. But actually what I do find is that what's possible is that you can work with other MPs from other parties around issues of shared concern. And so, for example, we've just managed to get through now an agreement from the government that they will introduce statutory personal, social, health and economic education. I put down a private member's bill on that issue, but I've also been working with MPs right across the political spectrum to really push the government on that. And I think actually what it means if you're on your own, you have to work well with others, and that's how you get things done.